Hello, Gasheads, and welcome to this week's build-up episode, looking ahead to Saturday's game away at Coventry. I'm your host, Max Alderson, and I'm delighted to be joined again by Laurie from The Lonely Season. Hi, Laurie, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Max. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. Good to speak to you again. This is your second or third appearance on GasCast, I can't remember.
I think it's second. Rob did one before, but this is my second.
That's right, yeah, we'll have to give you guys a hat-trick ball for your third appearance on GasCast. Yeah, always good to have your insight on Coventry. We've played each other quite a bit in succession, and we've got a few links, obviously, with the players going to and from. So it's good to get your insight on all things Coventry and Rovers related. Um, Early days in the season. Why don't you talk us through briefly your first two games and how you think you've done in this opening fortnight of the season? You started with a solid 1-0 win at home against Southend United, Zane Westbrook with the only goal, and then probably a more disappointing 0-0 away at Bolton, well, what is effectively Bolton's youth side. Why don't you talk us through each of those? No, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but
You should. You absolutely should.
got to say it how it is, unfortunately, Laurie.
Yeah, I mean, don't hold back, mate. No one else is. So, yeah, so Southend, I didn't actually go to that game, but I've seen the highlights and spoken to people about it, and it was just, I think it was a pretty even game. We popped one in from the edge of the box, like you said, Zane Westbrook, and we ended up beating them, but I don't think it was particularly comprehensive. Southend missed an incredible chance late on in the game and made our keeper produce some pretty excellent saves. So it wasn't like we ground it out with any kind of security. But Bolton was a serious crash back down to earth because they barely played a senior player. I think their oldest player was maybe 23 or 24. They had Kurt Zuma's brother in there who was 21, and a goalkeeper who was, belied his 17 years with one of the best performances I've seen from a keeper, and especially a keeper that young. And we definitely had enough chances to win it. But, we had 3 goals disallowed. But you shouldn't really be relying on kind of debatable decisions to beat a team that is essentially making its Football League debut. They didn't really play a striker. They just sat back. We kind of played the game as if we were playing against any other team in the league, and it wasn't a special circumstance whatsoever. What we should have done is just thrown our biggest, most horrible players up front and just bombarded them for as long as it took before they just started crying and eventually just let us through. But instead, we just kind of had 67% possession, passed it around neatly in front of them, and didn't really ask too many questions. And then were outraged when the referee didn't give a few contentious penalties and the linesman kept on disallowing goals like it was going out of fashion. So yeah, it was really disappointing. And one of the goals definitely, I say definitely, it was still kind of a hard one to call. But the kind of wider problems that came out of that game were we've signed this new striker from Peterborough called Matt Godden, and we've used the Connor Chaplin money to sign him, and it's not entirely clear where he's going to play because we started playing a 4-3-3 this year. We just sold Tom Bayliss to Preston, who is our kind of shining light, and he was the fulcrum of this 4-2-3-1 that we played. But now he's gone. We're playing a 4-3-3 with Bakayoko of Walsall and Bristol Rovers fame.
Yeah.
At the front of it. And he's kind of like an unbelievably incompetent but key member of the squad, which is really hard to explain. Because
I think I understand what you mean. We've all had, a lot of clubs have had strikers like that, which are, they lack grace, shall we say, but do offer in other areas. And I can understand that why he'd be a focal point. But surely Matt Godden, with the impressive start he had at Peterborough, surely deserves at least a try up front as a solo striker with, like you say, an attacking 3 behind him. Do you not think that would work better than someone like Bakayoko?
Oh, 100%. But Mark Robbins is stubborn at the best of times, so he normally decides to do something and then sticks with it, whether it's going well or not. And yeah, I don't know, just because he signed Connor Chaplin last year, and it quickly became clear that we didn't know what to do with Connor Chaplin. And I'm hoping the same thing hasn't happened here, but it does look a little bit like that might be happening again. And we just have other players who really rely on playing with that. We really needed to play a 4-4-2 on Saturday, but we have other players who we almost render irrelevant if we change to that system. Like we've got this guy called Jordi Hawula who plays kind of like a attacking left forward. He can't
Yeah.
really play as part of a two. He can't really play left midfield, and he was our top scorer last year. So Robbins really wants to keep him in the team. We've got this guy we've signed called Jabello, who's a kind of right attacking forward. He's more of an out and out winger than Hawula, so he's trying to get him into the side. And without Bayliss as that like natural kind of number 8, he's not really a number 10, just a kind of attacking central midfielder. We now have 3 slightly more pedestrian midfielders in that middle 3. So yeah, I mean, it's early days, but it was really testing watching us huff and puff against Bolton on Saturday, because they weren't up to anything and we ran out of ideas pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I guess that's it's a frustrating thing because you almost want to have faith in the system that you play, but at the same time, it's such a unique fixture that you almost think perhaps could you have gone 4-4-2 and had 2 central midfielders, because they're not going to be out muscled or bullied by the youth midfielders of Bolton, and had 2 up front against their 2 centre backs rather than just one. I'm not sure how, I don't know if you've prepared for that eventuality in pre-season. I know we haven't prepared for a 4-4-2 too much, but it's one of those where do you set up that way and adapt and change your system for the sake of that one fixture, because it is almost a pre-season friendly, so to speak, in terms of the quality you're going to be playing. It's like playing a local side in a pre-season friendly where you can be a little bit more flexible. Do you think that that's what Robin should have done in that match, or do you think he should have did what he did and stuck to his guns and keep going with the same team selections?
No, I think undoubtedly he should have been more flexible, but he is one of the least nimble managers when it comes to stuff
Sure.
like that. He doesn't like just changing at short notice situations. Like he's awful at changing the direction of a game. Like once we go behind, we tend to lose. Once we go ahead, we tend to win. And he will occasionally throw like a crazy roll of the dice and do like a double substitution after 10 minutes of the second half, like he did on Saturday. But the substitutions he made were so catastrophically bad, he almost should have just left it as it was. He brought on a striker who, not dissimilar to Bakayoko in that he's like physical, tall, not particularly great with the ball at his feet, but good in the air and can occasionally finish. He brought him on at left wing for his first appearance since doing his ACL a year ago. And it was one of the most agonizing things to watch as this
Yeah,
poor guy,
it's
Maxime Biamo, just like toiled away on the left-hand side, just wondering what the hell he was doing out there.
Yeah, it almost sounds like he did treat it a bit like a friendly, with maybe underestimating or just assuming that the goal would naturally come that would win the game later on, without really being, like you said, too adventurous or flexible with the formation of the team selection. Um, I
Yeah, I
was
think that the atmosphere contributed to that as well, because Bolton, their fans were just going ballistic the whole game. They were so delighted to be watching a football match at all. And our fans were unbelievably complacent. Like the first goal we had disallowed wasn't disallowed until about 25 seconds after it gone in.
Yeah,
But we all celebrated kind of like clapping it, not actually celebrating it. It was like, oh, this is going to be the first of 10. Let's not get too excited. But then by the end, when we had a goal disallowed in the 92nd minute, obviously we went ballistic, only to be made to look stupid again. But we were complacent, Robbins was complacent, the players were complacent. And the only tiny bit of maybe excuse I can come up with is it was just such a strange situation to be in, because it wasn't even like an FA Cup tie playing a lower league team where you're kind of against some team who's well up for it and really physical, going to like throw everything at you. this Bolton team would have been happy to lose 1 or 2-0. The 0-0 was like winning the Champions League for them. It was unbelievably big result. And I just don't think our players, probably not helped by Robbins, had any idea how to deal with the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's one of those that people don't really know how to approach this yet. And as time goes on, assuming that they don't get taken over before the transfer deadline, um, teams will sort of look at how other teams have played them and almost like you were sort of the first to do it, you and Wickham, and will sort of obviously, see what worked, what didn't work, what their weaknesses are, because they are a new side, and they may be kids, but you don't know if they're going to be backs to the wall or if they're going to try and play some football or if they're literally going to try and just get a point for their pride. It was a bit of an unknown, so it's difficult to set up against a team like that. And yeah, I just think it, like you said, there was many factors, and it's a disappointing result for you. But I'm sure you'll be back to business against us on Saturday.
I'm actually back us more against you than I would against Bolton. That's just a normal fixture.
Yeah, sure. Why don't we move on to that a little bit then? So, you are currently on 4 points. We are on 1 point. We drew with Wickham 0-0 at home in probably what is the most boring match I've watched in many years of following the Gas. We're very unambitious with our selection at home against a side that's probably one of the favourites for relegation. So Graham Coughlan really hasn't shown any real attacking ambition despite the players he's brought in over the summer. And I'm fully expecting us to line up with another rigid diamond midfield defensive formation away from home, like we did it towards the end of last season when we came to the Ricoh Arena and drew 0-0. I'm expecting us to go for that again and just try and maybe snatch one on the counter. Now Johnson Clark-Harris is back in the first team lineup, so from my point of view, I'm not expecting any surprises in the lineup. I just think we'll be solid and maybe try and get 1 or 2 clear-cut chances in a game and try and win it. But I don't think we're going to be anything too ambitious. How are you expecting to line up? Obviously, there's a number of signings that have come in over the summer. McFadzean, Jamie Allen, Jabello, like you said. Castanier, I'm not sure if he's played for you too much. And of course, Matt Godden, the big one, 750 grand from Peterborough. Is it many of those going to feature, or is it just going to be the core of last season? Obviously, you've lost a few as well, but what sort of lineup are you expecting to see?
Well, I think on Saturday we had 5 players who finished last season in the first team, so that's a pretty big turnover, but not as big as some clubs. I think we're playing tonight against Exeter in the Cup, and Robbins, I think, is going to play a reasonably strong team because he's been told that he can only really bring people in if we make a bit more money out of somewhere, and he thinks that the Cup run is the way to do that. But he tends not to really make wholesale changes. I think our back four will remain the same. There were a couple of impressive performances at the back, despite not really being challenged. So I think we probably will set up 4-3-3 again, unless Godden has a really good game tonight. Bakayoko didn't play awfully on Saturday, but we have to make some form of changes because we just didn't really threaten enough. And if you're going to set up how you say you are, and we're going to need to come and break you down, then we do need some attacking threat. I think you should probably. I was impressed with Jabello. It's the first time I've seen him. He's just a really direct runner. He'll play out wide. Hawula, you just never know what you're going to get from him either. He would be completely invisible. He won't really have a game where you'll say he's awful, but you just won't even notice he's on the pitch. And that does happen at least like 2 out of every 5 games. So it just kind of depends whether Robbins decides this 4-3-3 isn't a goer and he's going to change it up to get Godden into the side. But I think that would be a very un-Robbins thing to do. So
sure.
I would expect another 4-3-3, maybe a couple of changes. Zane Westbrook, who scored in the first game, had a particularly poor game against Bolton, so he might come out. Jamie Allen has been signed to play as our first choice central midfielder, so, and everyone's talking about him as if he's going to reinvent the wheel for us. So
well, him and McFadzean were 2 key players in that Burton side last season, who were probably one of the few teams not involved in a relegation scrap along with yourselves. two good players, I think. So um, Jamie Allen in particular was impressed by. He's only 24 as well, I believe. So his best years are ahead of him. McFadzean's obviously a bit more experienced, but two players there who I would expect to be starting for most League One sides.
Best player to never play for Coventry City because everyone's talking about him like he's some kind of messiah. So I hope he is, because Westbrook is a limited player. He's kind of quite a box ticking midfielder who plays a lot of percentages and doesn't really advance the game or take any risks. So I think Alan will be a more adventurous and kind of more fully formed player than that. But yeah, the Bolton game seems to have really created some divides in our fan base. Like, some people, oh, it's 2 games in, we're just getting used to it. Other people saying, this is Robin's like 150th game as manager. Why is he still making the same mistakes over and over again?
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to say. We need our new signings to start playing and actually getting a sense of how good they are, whether they're actually going to be part of the first team. And we've got people coming back from injury as well. So yeah, it will be interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely going to be a strange dynamic about it, with the atmosphere, the home atmosphere being obviously at St Andrews rather than at the Rico, and obviously the performance at Bolton was disappointing, so it may be a bit of a tense atmosphere. Speaking of St Andrews, what's it been like from a fan's point of view? Obviously, it's the second time you've moved away from the Rico now. Obviously, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that's still bad. What's the general mood among the fan base? Is this just sort of a delaying what is the inevitable, or is this part of a solution until something gets sorted off the field? Or do you think it's just sort of like a kid not doing their homework until the last minute and just delaying it and delaying it and delaying it? Do you think that SISU are going to sell up or find a solution, or are they just sort of pushing the issue aside, so to speak?
Well, Dave Body and Sisu said that there was no way we could agree to the terms that were being laid out to us by Wasps and to stay at the Rico. So, I mean, who knows how true that is. I actually spent some of the journey talking to our chairman on the way back from Bolton. He came on the train with us. And he just said it was impossible for us to agree to it because it would have been catastrophic for the club. I mean, I don't really know how much of that to believe. But in terms of the mood of the fans, even the attendance indicates that people are more positive, or at least more forgiving about this move than they were about Northampton, because I think it was about 6,000 or 7,000, which is more than Northampton was. I mean, it was down at like kind of 1,100-1,200 for some games at Northampton. So really, like, apocalyptic attendances. And people said that the atmosphere was pretty nice against Southend. Like, we fill up one stand. So I think for the bigger games we might have like 2 stands, or we have 1 stand for the away fans, but at least 2 stands for home fans. Yeah, I think it's hard to gauge at the moment. There's so much noise on Twitter, and there's always rumours flying around about how we'll be back in by October once this, that, and the other gets done. I still think that Wasps need the money too badly for us to remain the entire season at St Andrews. So I don't think it's impossible that we'll be back at the Rico before January. But in terms of making a prediction about whether SISU are going to sell, I don't think SISU are going to sell the club. Like, who would buy it in their right mind? We have no assets whatsoever.
Sure.
It's literally the least appealing prospect in the world. Like, there's a dozen other clubs you'd buy before Coventry. It's madness. People who talk about these saviors bowling in to kind of change everything, like they I wouldn't trust anyone to buy us, because I think, have you not looked at the other clubs? This is a disaster.
Yeah, but there has to be a way forward and a direction that the club goes in. It's sad to see the state of the EFL at the minute, but Coventry in particular is just a situation that almost has no solution, and there needs to be a solution in a direction. Otherwise, it's just going to be could it just be this every season? Moving elsewhere. I don't know. I'm not a Coventry fan, so I'm not sure on the ins and outs. But from the outside looking in, it just seems like such a sad situation that surely has to have a solution between Wasps and yourselves. I know
Yeah,
that.
it's bleak. Like, and some people I think get really, really down about it. But I've felt pretty powerless about the situation for like quite a long time. So I really just try and concentrate on the football as much as I can, because if you get bogged down in the politics of this club, you'd never think about anything else. And nobody got into supporting football to like think about club politics, I don't think.
Yeah,
And I can understand why people do, because they think that arguing about it on Twitter with other fans is going to lead to some kind of progress, but it's too dismal. Like, if you ever even actually look into the finances of our club as well, that is pretty terrifying. And I think we've actually been semi-decent in the last 18 months, 2 years, in terms of taking money in and actually putting it back into the club. We've sold some good players, but we are actually paying money for people and buying good players. So it isn't a complete asset strip at the moment. SISU are reinvesting some of the money that we're getting from people like Bayliss and Madison. Hopefully when Callum Wilson goes, and if Madison goes, we'll get more money. We definitely will get more money. And SISU have proved that they will actually spend a percentage, if not all of the money that's coming in on new players, because getting us into a higher division is going to make them money. So,
yeah,
I mean, like you say, it's a bleak situation, but Mark Robbins has made it easier over the last 18 months to be a Cov fan.
that's good to hear. Before we sign off, should we get some match predictions from yourself and myself on how we think we're going to do? I'll start with you. How do you think how do you think the final score will look on Saturday afternoon?
I think the fact that, have you scored a goal yet?
We have not, no.
Okay, you haven't
No.
scored a goal. We haven't conceded a goal. So I'm going to go with, surely Johnson Clark Harris has got to score at some point. So I think 2-1 to us.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, like you say, we've not scored a goal, but we have got Johnson Clark Harris back, and I've just had a notification pop up on my phone of our lineup tonight against Cheltenham and Town, and he is starting up front with Tyler Smith and Kyle Bennett either side of him. So a 4-3-3 rather than the diamond I was talking about, which looks a little bit more attacking. If that does well tonight, we may play something a bit more adventurous, but I still think he'll stick to his guns, and away from home he likes to grind out results. So I'm not expecting anything exciting from us, and I do think you do have a lot of quality, especially with Godden up front, and you've spoken about Gibello this evening with me, and how direct he is and how quick he is down the wing. I just can't see us keeping a clean sheet after Blackpool turned us apart on the opening day. So I would say 2-1's fair. I'll probably agree with that and say 2-1 Coventry. So I'm in agreement. Yeah.
I mean, we are finishing with absolutely abysmal on Saturday, so definitely hold out. Like, things could definitely change.
Yeah, well, it's still early days in the season, isn't it? Clubs are finding their feet where they're where they are, where the quality is. New players gelling together. So very difficult to predict these early results. But I've just got no good feeling at all going into this. So hopefully we'll put on a good performance tonight against Cheltenham and take that forwards. But we'll see.
How's Tom Davies getting on?
Oh, he's superb. He did a goal line clearance against Jack Grimmer on Saturday. Grimmer had a late shot for Wickham, and Davies cleared it on the goal line, and both were didn't shut up about it in the post match, and how they're best mates and now they're playing against each other. But yeah, I really like Davies. What I've seen, he's solid, he's loud. He certainly lets other players know where they should be and if they're not in the right position, which I like. You need leaders all over the pitch, and I think Davies is definitely a leader. And we've needed someone like that at the back, arguably for 5 or 6 years, really, because our centre backs are quite small and quiet, organised, but not the most vocal or commanding. And Davies is definitely that. So,
how many raking passes has he played so far?
to be honest, I think both centre backs have been trying to give it to the fullbacks as much as possible,
Yeah.
because we seem to be playing with attacking fullbacks now with Luke Leahy and Mark Little. So they seem to be their instructions are, if they can, lay it off to the fullback and then play down the wing. But the crossfield passes haven't been of the best quality. But we haven't had the best of hold-up players up front to bring it down. So hopefully with Johnson back in now, that'll be a bit of a connection between him and Davies. But we'll see. It's early days. I mean, I like what I see so far. So fingers crossed for more of that. And Abu Agogo as well has looked okay. Nothing outstanding, but certainly not the worst player on the pitch, which is about as good a compliment as I can give it this after last season. So yeah, it seems okay. I mean, hopefully in January we're not raiding your bench for any more players.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be raiding our own reserves for more players, I think, by that point, once all of our signings have flopped. But yeah, fingers crossed we won't do that.
Fingers crossed for good seasons for both of us. I think we're two decent sized clubs, and both deserve better than what we have been getting recently. So yeah, hopefully a good game and good season for both of us. So yeah, thanks for joining me, Laurie. Gasheads, thanks for listening. We'll be back with a normal episode tomorrow. Please like and share this on social media if you enjoyed it, and up the gas. We'll see you next time.